The crypto world seems to be split in half, with half thinking the next bull run won't come until 2025 after the 2024 Bitcoin halving. And then half thinking, nope, the technical analysis is suggesting it'll be much sooner. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a magic crystal ball. Then we'd be able to tell you for sure. But we can take a look at the charts and see what the charts are telling us at present. Today, we are joined by Paul from Definity as we look at some macro factors that are impacting Bitcoin price and the crypto market, as well as some viewer picks and suggestions. Welcome to the Crypto Rain channel. I'm your host, Jay Rain. If you like money in crypto and you're looking for a seasoned investor's take on the crypto market, join the Rainmaker family. You can do that as easily as liking the video and subscribing. We also have a free Telegram channel below that you can interact with the Rainmaker family and myself. Do note, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a crypto investor myself. We do want to thank our Patreon members. We do have a private Discord that our Patreon members get access to. And make it rain on that like button, strap in for this show, and let's welcome Paul from Definity.
It's great to be here. It's a very interesting market. You may have heard, even if you're not looking at the broader markets, you'll have heard how the dollar's strengthening, possibly how the pound's weakening, which may have made it over the pond to you. Because there's been some savage moves in the FX markets, which is all pretty much what we've been talking about. I've had a quick look at the picks that the viewers have suggested. I had a very quick look and really looking forward to getting into them. So yeah, great to be here.
Well, yeah, let's do it. Let's jump into some of the macro things that are on your mind, Paul.
Sure. Well, the main theme at the moment is, of course, and has been the rise of the US dollar, the rise of US interest rates, the hawkish, which means the Fed want to raise interest rates. The opposite of that is dovish, when they want to lower interest rates. So they've been jacking up interest rates. The commodity markets have been plummeting, which is usually an indication that when they come to have a look at the next CPI or inflation numbers, those numbers won't be as aggressively high as we've expected or as they've expected. So there's a good chance that interest rates won't be going up as quickly in the US, but it's actually starting to cause a lot of problems in the financial markets. The dollar strength is across the board. I mean, it's like virtually every single currency. And this is causing, well, it's a twofold thing. The first thing, obviously for the US companies, it's causing a problem. And it will also dampen inflation in the US because import prices will be lower. But the other factor to consider is that if you could buy overseas assets at 20-30% lower than you could before, and you wanted prime real estate in the UK and you're an American investor, well, you've got your chance. And so I think there will be a lot of people eyeing this high dollar and this low sterling, and basically high dollar and low everything else, and looking to invest. So this is how the market will balance itself out. So I'm of the opinion that we're approaching the end of the dollar move as more and more people jump on that idea. Now, this is the dollar index, which is I don't think we're going to see a big crypto rally until interest rates start to ease and this risk on phase comes back in. So the trend is still up. But today we've had a very interesting situation where the market has made a high and then turned around. So that's a bull trap. Now, it's a very small one. It's also called an engulfing pattern, and because this bearish candle, if you like, although I use bars, has engulfed the previous two bullish bars. So that's to some seen as a very short-term sell signal. But the interesting thing is we're in my zone of resistance between sort of 12 and 15. I mean, when you're trying to predict the end of a trend, it's very difficult, and it's not something that you should do lightly. You're looking for certain signs, and those signs are that the markets explode and then reverse. And we're seeing something close to that, but it's not quite there for me to be completely sure that this is the end. And you look at sentiment. Well, sentiment is very bullish, the US dollar. There's, fear out there of what's going on in Russia, and this pipeline stuff hasn't helped either. So, but the dollar is higher, but it's still, within this trend parameter. So I'm looking for signs that it's going to start to weaken. And there are some signs. It's early days, but until we've seen this top complete, I'm not going to say, this is it until I'm pretty clear. But I'm monitoring the signs that are fragmenting, which are telling me that perhaps this has gone too far. One of them is sentiment. So the fact that it's all over the front page of the UK press that the dollar's so strong, sterling's so weak, and that the UK government, well, the UK Bank of England are actually intervening in the bond markets. It must be that they're talking to the Fed saying, listen, we got a problem, we better sort this out. You put inflation on the back burner and prioritize the markets, which is what we expected them to do because the markets are falling very aggressively. And if we look at the 10-year yield, which is driving interest rates and mortgage prices and all the things that businesses need to do in terms of borrowing, this is still in this upward trend and it hasn't turned around. It took out the high. It's still going up, but it's the price action is rising, but at a lower pace at the moment because of today's price action and today's news. Now, I think it's put a check on people's expectations of higher rates, at least for today. Perhaps it could still go higher, but if I was to put my finger in the air and say, where could this stop? I'd say we're probably a couple of weeks, towards the low or the high, whichever way you want to look at it. So I think we're approaching the end. This is definitely the beginning of the end. And it just feels like we're getting there. All the little pieces are coming together to say that this could be it. Now, equity markets, which they're the most sensitive, so they tend to drive most. You see the moves happening more quickly in the equity markets than generally anywhere else. The S&P has just matched the previous low from June. It went through it. There would have been short sellers for sure as it went through, because that's what technicians do. That's what I do. It snapped back up today. So it's sort of stepping on a landmine, we call it. So you sort of sell it and then it goes bam, straight up in your face. So they probably would have cut out their positions, waiting for that to break down again. Now, that's not bullish enough to say we could buy from anything other than a very short-term perspective. So speculative buys are definitely going in, trying to catch a low around here. But that's not enough to say that this is a major low. And I think perhaps we could get down to this sort of 50% area around 3,500 before it turns around. We'll have to see. So when risk comes back into the market, which I think it will, and because it's the nature of these markets, either we're heading for Armageddon or we're close to a bigger reversal. I think cooler heads will prevail in both the markets and the geopolitical risk. And what we're seeing is, as I say, the end of the phase rather than the beginning. So we could be close within a couple of weeks of the low, and interest rates could start to ease off. The dollar should start to weaken. And then that puts us in a good position for the crypto assets. Like Bitcoin may have made a new low in that time. It's flirting with the lows. It hasn't actually taken the lows out. Ethereum's in a better position, but there's a lot of activity in the altcoins. They're surprisingly, some of them are very strong. There's been some big moves. So I think that's encouraging, the fact that there is this fragmentation, but some of the fragmentation is actually quite bullish in the altcoins. So it's a very interesting market. But even I think a lot of seasoned investors would have difficulty trying to call where things are going to go, because we have so many factors that are coming together at the moment. We've got geopolitical risk. You've got interest rates moving up higher. Usually when equities are falling, bonds go up because people move out of stocks into bonds. But that's not happening. You're seeing a wholesale move in the bond market. At the same time, commodities are moving. At the same time, currencies are moving. It's a really unusual situation. And as we say, it's not impossible, but it's just kind of unusual. So the market is highly volatile right now, and that makes it a bit more unpredictable. It makes it harder to predict because volatility is quite high.
It could go so many different ways, and there's so many variables floating around that's one of the things that makes it so impossible to predict. However, I've been looking with many audience members. We've been looking for a decoupling from the stock market. And one of the Patreon members in the private Discord, he shot me a message and he sent a picture, that the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ were down a couple points and Bitcoin and ETH were up a couple points. And he said, the decoupling has begun. And I was like, nah, I would like to see it stronger. But at some point there could be a decoupling from especially the NASDAQ, because what's been interesting is since Wall Street got involved in Bitcoin and crypto, they've treated it like a tech stock. And so when they sell off their tech stocks, they sell off Bitcoin and ETH and other cryptos then dump too. And they've been strongly correlated. And I've been trying to see if I could determine when there might be a decoupling at some point, because I think there will be a decoupling at some point.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean, I think in terms of the US dollar, the reason why it looks like the dollar's strength is inferring Bitcoin weakness is more because the dollar's going up because interest rates are going up more than it's linked to the dollar. So in terms of decoupling, I was expecting the dollar to decouple from the Bitcoin move at some point. And I thought we were seeing that now, actually, because the dollar's moved up and Bitcoin hasn't made a new low. So there's new highs in the dollar, no new lows in Bitcoin. So that element I thought was interesting. But I see the NASDAQ stocks as risk on. I see the crypto assets until they are mature as risk on. So it could be that, you see, some of the NASDAQ stocks have been affected by the pandemic and they were very high because of it. And there has been that correction. So, what's Netflix got to do with the technology that we're looking at in crypto assets? Probably nothing. But of course, it's going to be dragged down by it. But I think there will be a bull market where everything will synchronize to the upside. But that's what we want. We want to see the S&P going up, the NASDAQ going up, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and you can't say every single altcoin because they're not all going to go up. You've got to be, those are the ones where you've got to be the most selective because they're the highest risk, the biggest volatility. 50% in one day is like insane moves for anything else, but it's fairly normal for some of these altcoins because of the levels that they trade at. So yeah, it's an interesting point. But I don't know whether it will actually matter in the end. I don't think it needs to decouple. But the other element of it is the NASDAQ has got chip makers within it, and if chip makers demand is driven a lot by this space, it's all about mining, it's all about getting tech setups and buying computers and warehouses of of mainframe computers and stuff like that. So there is an element that is linked to it in the same way that I guess food production and food prices are kind of linked together as well. So there was definitely a lot of air in the NASDAQ that needed to come out, and perhaps the S&P maybe will be a better sort of correlated indicator to the crypto assets than the NASDAQ. Possibly, I don't know, but I think they're all going to basically go up in synchronicity.
So when your best guess is when the dollar starts to fall, then people will start going risk on, which means they'll be more likely to come back not only into equities but also into the crypto market. Everything. And that seems to have been setting up for a long time. And what we've been watching with the rise of the dollar and waiting for it. I don't know when this decoupling would happen. It would seem like it will happen at some point, especially Bitcoin itself isn't so much a tech stock so much as it's basically a hedge against the US dollar as the global world currency, right? And with politicians in the US making such poor decisions that deflates the value of it, at some point it might flip strongly towards a lot of other countries, because we've seen El Salvador and a few other countries go to recognizing Bitcoin as a currency, that then if like oil starts getting traded in Bitcoin and other things, that the US might lose its world reserve currency. And I think that's part of why Janet Yellen and some other people in the U.S. That essentially work for the White House are so anti-crypto, is because they don't want to lose the power of having it as a reserve world currency. I feel like if they would make better actions and not devalue the currency so much, that would be a greater way to secure it than, but you know, every politician, every president, every Congress in the U.S. has a strong incentive to spend more money than they take in. So they print and they devalue it, which is what Bitcoin was built to be a hedge against.
Well, you make a very good point there, because of course it was founded in just after the main financial crisis, 2007, 2008, for that very reason. And to talk about a safe haven asset, especially in this environment, I did wonder, actually, like a couple of days ago, I was thinking, could it start to become a safe haven asset with all currency volatility that's going on? That's definitely possible. And that would actually tie in with what your Discord member was saying about decoupling, because if that happens, it takes on a status of its own. And there's certainly going to be people wondering about what's a safe place to put their money when they're seeing the value of their currency decline by such a massive amount. I mean, people complained about the volatility. Taleb complained about the volatility in Bitcoin and saying, you can't use it as a currency because it's too volatile. I mean, I thought that was a very strange statement, given that some currencies are extremely volatile. It just sort of depends on the environment. I could see what he was saying. I could understand his point, but look at what's gone on in the last few weeks. And as anybody who's been in the markets a long time knows that you can see absolutely incredible moves in the currency markets. The currency crisis of the late 90s was a great example of that, when the Asian financial crisis hit, and you just saw a massive collapse in Asian currencies. You could have gone with $10 to Thailand and sort of had a 2-week holiday. You wouldn't have been able to spend the money because the currency was so weak, and so that's the nature of currency crises. So in order to kind of summarize it all, it's not going away, and people are obviously very down on it because it's gone down a long way. But if you were to sort of go back in a time machine and say, well, Bitcoin is trading currently around sort of 18,000, and we actually nearly 20,000 today. It's had another good bounce, and where we think it's too weak, you'd be thinking, well, that doesn't sound right, because it's still way up from its lows. It's still in an upward trend, a long-term upward trend, which is why at some point I think that will come into play. And just popping the chart up here, talking about the low, it hasn't taken that low out. It's had a very good chance to do it, and whilst we're below it, whilst we're so close to it, it's like when you're close to a cliff edge, you've got to be careful, and we are still close to that cliff edge. But I'm encouraged by the fact that it hasn't been taken out. So for me, a win is it just holding stable for now until the global markets settle down. And once they settle down, if this shows any sign of strength, I'm going to be, very bullish on it.
I wanted to share this chart. I don't know that we've talked in depth about this before. I know we have just lightly. This is Plan B stock to flow model. And what's incredible is how accurate they had been on their predictions right up until about this point. And what's interesting is they used a model much as used with gold to determine gold's value. So that they use, essentially, that's why it's called the stock to flow model. And so the supply of Bitcoin versus the demand. And what's interesting is how different it's broken away from this. So this suggests that the true value of Bitcoin is somewhere around, based on the supply of it versus the overall demand. And you notice this line, it always it swings way above it, and then it swings below it, often swing way above it again, and then below it. So here we've swung way, way below it. And it suggests the true demand is about $110,000 per Bitcoin. Right now we're trading at 20,000. And I suspect he wasn't wrong on this. I think there's some macro forces that are pushing this beach ball down below the water. But like any beach ball pushed below the water, there's extreme pressure pushing it up, and it takes a lot of energy to hold it down. At some point, when it does swing up, it's going to overshoot this. So what some people are suggesting, you see this big change, and this is approximately when the next halving is. And so the supply, the increase of supply is then halved. And so that's what then causes this value to go up. A lot of times the miners have accumulated extra Bitcoin that they're then able to sell off for profit. The problem is a lot of miners aren't accumulating a lot of extra Bitcoin right now because the price is so low. Many of them are probably close to a break even. So at some point, this tends to overshoot. And when it overshoots, it can overshoot by a lot. And notice that this next marker that it says the price that it should adjust to after the next halving is 1.266 million.
Wow. That's pretty high.
Yeah. And so we'll see. We'll see. This is something we can't look at in the past, and really a lot of times in history, almost everything in history, you can find the cycles repeating itself. But this is a very different idea that was never able to be possible, where a lot of times in the history, you look for the strongest government in the world economically, and essentially they became the world currency. Like the British pound was the world currency because Great Britain, even though the size wasn't big, it projected its strength and power throughout the world, and trade was done because they were trading all over the world. And it's amazing that such a small nation basically controlled the economics of so many parts of the whole world. And so there, in the past 500 years, there's been 5 different world currencies, each of them lasting about 100 years. And so the US's currency really started to take dominance right after World War II, right? So close to about 80 years ago. And this time, because of where technology has gone, it's possible that no longer does monetary value have to be determined by the strength of a government, but the strength of code being set up in a decentralized way where it would be hard for any one government to even sabotage that. You would have to have all the major governments colluding together in order to sabotage Bitcoin. In other words, forcing all their miners to break the system.
Yeah. It's I see it as if you've ever read the book Sapiens. If you haven't, I'd suggest reading it. It's a fantastic work by Yuval Noah Harari. It's just incredible. It's basically about the history of man. But one of the really interesting elements was the beginning of recording the transactions that people had made for selling land, for buying cattle, and all that stuff. And that was a real breakthrough in technology because, of course, there was no way to do that at one point. And then if you had the ability to record something, then you had the ability to create money. And I think this is why, to me, the extension now is with the immutable elements of the blockchain. That to me is another step forward. It's the fact that it cannot be changed. It cannot be interfered with. It's not somebody individually writing a number down and saying this is what the value is. It's a completely different method that's never been done in history, never been perfected, even though the idea was there for a while. And so it takes a while for that to really break into the mainstream, and it's still not in the mainstream. I'd still argue it's still not in any way in the mainstream, because I doubt you could walk into, certainly not in the UK, you can't walk into a coffee shop and have a chat with people about Bitcoin. They'll have heard of it, but they won't know anything about it, and they probably won't know very much about how to use it either, although that is changing, of course. So as I was saying before, I think it was very similar to the beginning of the internet, when we had this idea there's something there, but people didn't really know how to use it. And this is what we're figuring out right now. People are figuring out how to actually use this technology, and I think we'll be surprised by the amazing things they create.
It's fun. We're on the cusp of some major breakthroughs, right? In some things that'll change the world for forever. I'm covering this week some more blockchain gaming and like land stuff. We talked in the past about how some of this Axie Infinity land that I bought for $80 later at the peak was selling for $80,000 to $120,000 for virtual land pieces. Well, let's jump into some viewer picks of requested items that they asked us to look at. The first being Metis DAO.
Yeah, sure. Right. So, so I popped a chart up here in advance. I haven't looked at all of them. I had a quick look at some, and this is quite an interesting chart in a few ways, because it's quite balanced on the overall trend in terms of there's an upward trend from the low August 21. So we could draw a trend line in from here and say that this is one trend. And then you've got this downward trend also coming in from sort of Jan 22. So this year's not been a great one, obviously. We got an interim rebound here, which was good, but it failed at an absolutely key level, key resistance point, which I think holds the key to the future of this long term. So $50 is where it needs to get through from a long-term perspective for it to have a chance. Before I'd say it's a long-term buy, but an interim buy it could be around these levels, because we're close to a trend line. There could be good support here. Now, a lot of what I'm going to say this week is still inferred by the macro conditions, which make me a bit more cautious than usual. So anything that looks kind of good, I'm still going to say wait, because I'm still looking at the bigger picture and how things there are quite volatile and could force some very strange moves elsewhere. But in normal circumstances, this would be quite a nice trend line to buy it against. And but that would be like a really tiny position. And the first signal that we're off to something more significant would be a break of this trend line. So that's coming in at the moment at 32, but remember it goes down with each day. So by the time even if it was to hold here or just slightly edge higher, by the time it goes up, it would be around 28. If it was to break it, that would be the level, maybe 27. So it's in a relatively neutral place here, but I like the fact that it's held over the low. It's close to support, and I'm going to say it's a wait, but I would understand a very small position. I'd understand adding just a little nibble. Now, I've got a feeling we might have talked about this before, but I know we've talked about so many, so it kind of difficult to remember sometimes.
Yeah, it's been a while since we talked about this one. A good point for somebody to have brought it up for us to look at, because it's some really interesting decision points. And it's going to be fun to see which way it breaks. A little bit on the fundamentals, market cap's at 103 million, which is pretty high given the environment that we're in. A lot of their supply is in circulation. I like that. So you see, okay, so not necessarily, less than half of the supply is in circulation. So the circulating supply is 4.354 million. The max supply is 10 million. So that means about 43% is in circulation right now. Yeah, so looking at their website, Ethereum layer 2 rollup platform. Okay. So probably it's going to gain some traction, as they did. Like ETH, nobody wants to have layer 2 solutions for ETH, right? But the reason that they're there is ETH can't handle massive numbers of transactions. And even with the change to proof of stake, still transaction cost went down just a little bit, but it can't handle a lot of stuff. That's why layer 2 solutions are out there, is to take a lot of stuff off chain, handle the transactions, and then they can eventually bring those transactions back on chain through one bigger transaction, or just, like you can settle a ton of it off chain through these layer 2. So maybe, fundamentally, I like it. For me, it's a wait, just because, bear market, there's lots of options. lots of things that I could buy, and this isn't quite looking good enough. I'd like to see how the decision breaks and see if it bounces really strong off this and then got a strong trend to the upwards. If I were going to hold it, and if I were going to hold it, it would just be a shorter term swing trade for me.
Okay.
Let's take, with that said, so for you, it was a wait.
It's a wait, yeah. And if, you know, I think my signal would be a break of this downtrend line. That would be in this environment, I'd go to a buy from that point. But for the moment, it's a wait.
Yeah, I'd like to see it continue to hold that support and break that resistance above it, right? That trend line.
Yeah.
As well. Let's take a look at Ultra or UOS. I really like this one. Let's see exactly where it's at.
Yeah, I've got a feeling this is one where we might. Okay.
Yeah, we looked at this a number of times.
Yes. So this is interesting, isn't it? Look at this price action. It's working its way round. It's going up, but it's going up in this channel that's so well defined that I'm just wondering. I don't like channels like this. The reason why I don't like them is because if it's going to go up, I want it to be smooth, and it tells me that there's less conviction in that move. See, when it goes down, look how smooth that move is. It's really fast. And so I want to see the same on the upside. Now, it's possibly a bit of an ask to get it to do that in this environment. So maybe that's not fair. We got to look at the macro position and say, look, it's working its way up. Why you can't be that critical of the price action here? But at least it is working its way up. It's just that all the price action is overlapping. It's not managing to get a foothold and then, you know, accelerate up from it. It keeps swinging below it, which is frustrating for short-term traders. That's for sure. But longer-term traders, if you're patient, I suppose it is working its way up. So the bias here, it has to be to the upside for me, just because it's working its way up here. Now, there is a clear potential stopping point that we've got to be aware of, and that will be this downward trend line. So until it actually takes that out and this resistance point here as well, so it's coming into this zone. If it keeps doing what it's doing here, it's going to come into this zone around 0.49, so around 50 cents. So it's the magic sort of 50 cents round number for this, where the resistance will be, where the top of the channel will be, and so the upside there, if it's really going to go, it's got to break it. That is a big barrier. So I'm going to say I'm cautiously positive on it. Where I would not like to see it go is below 30 cents. If it takes out 30 cents, then yeah, it's broken the channel. It's broken good support. Still very, very small positions, I would say, just having a little nibble more than anything else here. But I do like that it's trying to break higher. It also formed what was an inverse head and shoulders. So there's a little left shoulder, there's a head. The right shoulder has been pretty much too volatile for a smooth reversal. So it's not surprising that it's still in this range, because normally it would have broken out here and then gone straight up. That would have been how the pattern would have reversed. This would be the right shoulder, this is the left shoulder. So the fact that it came back through was a bad sign for the short-term trade. But it is trying to work its way up, and it does keep coming back to this zone. So I don't want to see it go too much lower. That would be bad. That would be breaking this pattern of this channel. So whilst it's in this channel, I think we could say a buy. But if it breaks the channel, that's first warning sign. Second warning sign would be a break of 30 cents, because that's key support. So I really wouldn't want to hold it below there.
Yeah, I like this one a lot for the long term. In the short term, that pattern's concerning to me, right? So for me, it would definitely be a wait. Depending on when I bought, I might even, if I had bought when it went a lot lower, I would even probably take a bit of profits out after it, probably bounce off this lower trend line and come back up. And that might be an early take profit zone for me, hoping that when it hits that 50-cent mark and stuff, it breaks down again, because there's a lot of resistance up there. Yeah, it hits a 50-cent mark. There's just all those patterns coming together that looks like it might get savage. Now, Ultra, as far as fundamentals, I like it a lot. Essentially, it's like a decentralized Steam. Now, for gamers, they know what Steam is. Steam is like one login, and you can play all these different games through your Steam hub. That once you sign into Steam, it basically can connect you to your different games that you've downloaded or purchased on Steam. A lot of the different items are all held there. Well, Steam went a very interesting way, and they turned their nose up to any games with NFTs, which is probably a mistake they'll look back on and regret as the company gets savaged. Eventually, they'll have to change that, but by the time they change that, it's going to be too late. And Ultra is embracing blockchain games and essentially trying to make a central hub. So you log into the Ultra system. They have a lot of partnerships with a lot of game developers that bring the games right to you, so that from your interface, you can then like have one interface and be able to log into your different games. Maybe even some of your items are compatible between those games. And this is where blockchain gaming is going, which is where gaming is going to be going. And Steam hasn't realized it yet. And Ultra does. It has good backers, strong team, been working on this for years. I think they're going to be successful. They're leading this. But that doesn't mean in the short term, it doesn't look a little bit concerning to me. Long term, their market cap still pretty, I mean, given this market, that's a pretty high market cap. But given this project, I feel like it's pretty reasonable. So it's just under 100 million market cap. Now, do notice only 27% of the supply is in circulation. The reason why that's important is that means there are tokens out there that maybe the marketing department of this project or the ecosystem that could be sold off, that can put some downward price pressure as those get sold off by the company to pay for things. And so that's why I always keep an eye on how many tokens are in circulation versus the total supply. Like this project a ton for the long term. For me, it's possibly even just a sell, not quite a sell yet. I would just wait till, let me go to logarithmic. Why is it not showing? There we go. I would wait to see if it does all of a sudden break down below this line, then I would sell. But it'll at least probably head up towards a 50-cent mark. And right now it's trading about 35 cents. So I would be trying to harvest because I did pick some up back here. I'd be trying to harvest at a little bit higher. All right. Let's jump over to the next one, which is XDC.
XDC. Right. Right. That's. Oh yeah. Let's see if I can find it from Trading View. Yeah. Okay. Right. So this is interesting. I'd like to know what they're up to. Let me just see whether I can get a bit more data. Put that on auto. Yeah, I mean, look, that's relatively high compared to the rest of the market. That's kind of doing okay. We've had a good rally here, so it's been flirting with the lows, which I think we've mentioned a few times, that how some of these coins, even some that are in bearish patterns, have come quite close to the lows. In normal circumstances, that would be a big red flag and you'd expect a breakdown, but they haven't as yet. It doesn't mean they're not going to, but it's interesting that they're turning around quite aggressively and having quite sharp moves to the upside. So this is percentage terms a massive move we've got going on here. This looks like a little potential pennant formation, which would normally extend upwards, but again, the macro conditions aren't favoring anything. So we've got to play it a bit more cautiously than usual. So overall, the trend is down, unfortunately. I mean, the trend is down from here, and it's fairly smooth. So what are we looking for to end this trend? Well, we need a solid reversal pattern. Now, there was an inverse head and shoulders here, which played out, which was great, but then it came back over or back below the neckline. And this could be forming a double bottom pattern, which is why I'm interested in it. Now, this low doesn't have to be above this low for it to be a double bottom. They don't have to be at the same level. All that has to happen is the market has to make a low, rally, make another low, and then rally through the previous resistance, which is nearly 4 cents, just over 3.7 cents. So at the moment, I'm going to have to say wait, but I really like the look of this. I like the way it's made a higher low because of the RSI. See, the RSI is relatively high here, but you know that can come off. And at the beginning of trends, sometimes the RSI goes up a lot anyway. So there are times when you look at it, and there's times when you ignore it. In a range, you look at the RSI, but when it starts to trend, it will be pinned fairly high up. So I'd look more at the price action when I think it's going to potentially trend. So I want to see if it can edge up a bit more. And if it does, this is the breakout level for me, because then it would complete this double bottom, and that would look really interesting. So I'm going to have to wait for now because it hasn't made that pattern as yet, but I'm certainly going to be keeping an eye on it. That is for sure. And it's a really great pick. So thanks for bringing it to our attention. Just to give the other side of if this doesn't extend, you know, if it can stay sideways whilst everything's going down, that's good relative price action. I'd like that. Where things go wrong is if it breaks this low here at 2.5 cents, then that's key support, and then all you've got is the previous low to hold it. So that would be a warning sign. But the big picture chart is looking good. It's gone up, it's correcting. So this could be an interim correction. If things start to turn around, the upside could be, you know, pretty big. So definitely one keeping an eye on. So thank you for showing it.
Yeah, some great suggestions by the viewers. A little bit of look at the fundamentals of it. So a few things. $401 million market cap. So it's got a fairly sizable market cap for where we are in the market, with most things being down quite a bit. And it's down quite a bit from its previous highs, hitting almost 20 cents. So, and it's trading about 3 cents. So it hasn't come down all that high, and it was just that high recently in August. So just last August, it totally shot up and has come down about 85% from those highs. Previously, during the crypto winter, you could have got this for zeros to count, basically 0.1 cents here, and at some points half of that. So it's still up 30x from even that 0.1 cent mark, and at some points it was half of that, so it's up 60x from there. What is the company itself? Well, they describe it here saying enterprise-ready hybrid blockchain for global trade and finance. So a lot of these blockchains that are set up for corporate use and other things, they've been now developing for several years, and they're probably in the place where they're starting to get used and partnerships there. So if you look at, they explain their benefits here. So Bitcoin was the first generation of blockchain, and you could consider that ETH introduced some new ideas of what you could do with blockchain, was the second generation. Now there's lots of third generations in the blockchain, and so they're listing themselves as a third generation blockchain. And so a little bit of a breakdown: you can do 2,000 plus transactions per second. The average fee is so infinitesimally small, it's not even very relevant, especially when you consider, ETH, you're often paying anywhere from $3 to $12 these days. And when it was high, you were paying $100 to, I think you paid a $750 transaction fee one time. Transaction confirmation, 2 seconds with finality. Smart contract support, yes. Energy consumption is abysmally small. And so that's their unique selling points, right? So a lot of these third generation blockchains are really developing and competing with each other now. And so 2,000 transactions per second plus seems really fast compared to these. I don't know that that's fast enough for the long term, unless that's just where they're at now and they have ideas to take it much faster. That's decently competitive for now. It's not going to be competitive at all in the future coming year, 2 years, 3 years, as some of these other projects hit much faster transaction per second. Yeah, for me, it's definitely a wait. I would just wait on this one. It hasn't come back down enough to be really interesting to me. It was so recently at a real big high. For me, it's totally a wait. Even if I had some, I might even sell it to roll into something that I just like the price better. Now, there may be some things that whoever suggested this knows about XDC on the fundamental side that I'm not aware of. They just recently did some major business partnerships or they did them a while ago and they're about to start getting used and most of the public isn't aware of it. That's the kind of information I love. I'm not aware of any information like that for XDC. So for me, it would possibly even be a sell just because there's just so many other things that are cheaper that personally that would be my choice to roll it into something that I think has higher potential upside. Let's take a look at Dows. We haven't looked at this one in a while.
Yeah, sure. I've just been getting that ready while you were discussing the previous one. And so here's the chart. As you can see, the first thing you'll notice is obviously we're in a big downward trend. But let's break down what's been going on more recently. So we got a low here on the 12th of May, and then another low 18th of June, which is around the low in the stock market. It's been consolidating, which is a good sign for a market that's has been in a downward trend and with the broader macro conditions. So to me, that's a plus. That's potential what we call accumulation, which means people are buying it while everything else is going down, while sentiment is bad. So that's a plus. On the minus, there isn't much of an upward trend to go with. I mean, if we were to try and draw, I was about to draw an upward trend line, but I wanted to show you what I would try and do. So this is the trend rate. So you can see the trend rate is very shallow. So it's it's pretty much a range. And so if we're buying it, then the stop would be below the upward trend line. If your stop's below the upward trend line, it's very, very close to where it is now. So I prefer to wait until this accelerates, at least breaks this trend line, this resistance line here. The main trend line is further away, so it might take a bit of time before it gets to that. But I like the fact that it's consolidating. I like the fact that it's trying to carve out this base that could actually mean that it's going to be going up from a longer term perspective, because the bigger the base, the bigger the rally that follows. There's only a couple of sort of head scratchers here, and that is, what was all this about? There was a big move up with lots of volume, and then literally it just dumped straight back down again. So that must have been very disappointing. Without knowing the fundamentals, I don't like to see things like that, because that upsets investors. You know, people buying into good news, and then it just sort of fizzles out the next day. That's a bit unusual, but you know, it happens. But what it has done is it's put a high watermark for the bullish sentiment. And from a long-term perspective, if it takes that resistance point out, then I'm really interested. So for me, it's a wait, and it's definitely worth keeping an eye on because it's holding in this consolidation. But like I say, we've got to see a bit more price action before we can turn to that bullish section. But at least it's not bearish for now.
Yeah, this one is high risk. I own a bunch of this myself, and unfortunately, my position's down on it, which frequently happens in this kind of market with my type of strategy. And so I tend to hold for periods. And the Polkadot ecosystem, essentially this is like derivatives on Polkadot. So if you think about what is it? Synthetics, SNX on, let's see, Coin Gecko. We want to get SNX on ETH, essentially. So SNX runs on the ETH platform, and synthetics went crazy a while ago, went all the way almost to $30. I remember when synthetics was trading for just pennies, and this is on the ETH ecosystem. So Dows is supposed to be a competitor to that on the Polkadot ecosystem, but the Polkadot ecosystem has really not done well the past year. A lot of their upcoming development, they were pushing for China and a lot of the developers and a lot of the investors out of China. And then China put a ban on crypto, which really slowed down Polkadot's growth. And so Shadows has greatly suffered, not just because the broader market has been down, but combined with that as well. And so the price has been savage. Now, what I like about the present price of where it's at now is it's so low that it's like you can pick up a lot, like a very small, $100 or $200, that if it comes back alive and thrives, your ROI is off the charts without much risk. So that's the part about the situation that I like. You're able to buy a ton for a little bit of money. The entire market cap, look at this, $326,000 market cap. So say somebody put in 0.1% of their portfolio. So if somebody had $100,000 and they put in 0.1%, that would be $100. But say it does come back alive and thrives and does a 50x from there, well, they turn that into $5,000. So what was 0.1% of their portfolio became 5% of the overall portfolio. And so that's what the kind of play is. As far as when to buy, it's decently low. It's good enough for like a tiny buy. I'm not seeing anything in the charts that tells me I would bet bigger on this, because sometimes on these risky plays, I will bet bigger amounts than like 0.1% of my portfolio. But yeah. So for me, it's kind of between a buy of a tiny buy. For somebody that has $1,000, that buy might only be like $10. So it's between a wait and a buy. And if you are going to put like 10 in it, the way to do it is on Pancake Swap. And so you can get it there for, very low transaction fee. So if you try to do it on Uniswap, it's going to eat up a bunch in the transaction fee. It's also traded on Blockfi and Gate.io for those that have a login there. All right, let's take a look at the next one.
Yeah. So the next one I've just sort of queued up is DDIM. So I'm guessing it's this one. Is it DuckDAO?
Yep.
DuckDAO Dime? Yeah, is that the one?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
That's a launchpad token.
Okay, so this is again, obviously it's been in a downward trend like pretty much everything else. It was trying to make a reversal pattern. It looked like this was left shoulder, we got a head, right shoulder, which is simply a base. All we're saying there is that the market is basing out and the downward trend is coming to an end, which it has done. So the downward trend has stopped. It's now going sideways. But usually with an inverse head and shoulders, the market then starts to rally and it goes into a new upward trend. We've not seen much of that. It's only playing within the range. So we're still pretty much the central point between the high of the recent range and the low of the recent range. So we're in a very neutral position. But the neutral position is adding to the bullish potential of this rather than the other way around, because when the trend is down, it's on the bears to make the trend go lower. And if they're not doing that, again, especially with the broader market conditions, then to me, that's a positive sign. Now, if it's positive, it needs to then move up. So we've got to see the evidence of the upward trend come out before we can become bullish. And we'll need it to break this resistance point, which would have been a trigger for the reversal pattern anyway, or very close to that. So around this, let's see, it's around 3.9, I think it's saying here. Yeah, about 3.9. If it can break through 3.9, I might even be tempted to pick it up if it was curving up and getting close to it. Now, that's a decision that each individual has to make, whether you buy it expecting the momentum to take it through. Obviously, there's a chance that'll fail, or you wait until it's gone through and then you'll be paying a bit more for it. But it's got through a good level, which means that the probabilities just raised a bit more that you've hit a base. But where it is now, it's too neutral for me to say it's a buy here. It could equally continue its downward trend. Now, I think it's very much 60-40 that it would go to the upside. I'm preferring the upside because it's held in so nicely, but it would only take one push towards sort of 207 for this to not look very good again, depending on how it did it. So I've got to stay neutral here, but I do like the way it's traded, and I do like the fact that this is potentially a basing pattern. So I'm hoping that if everything is turning up in the next few weeks, this will go with it.
Yeah, that's interesting how we've been seeing all these signs that a lot of things showing bottoming signals. Now, DuckDAO Dime is something I used to hold back in March of last year when I was heavily involved in a lot of launchpads trying to get these projects as they came out, because during an increasing market, launchpad tokens get you access to projects that you can then buy at their initial DEX offering, and sometimes turn around, flip what you just bought for sometimes 5 or 10 or 50x gains. And so I held some DuckDAO Dime. There were only a few launchpads back then. There are now like 50 to 70. So for me, I am not holding any of this anymore. At the time, they were one of the launchpads that had access to some good projects, some of the good projects coming out. Anymore, I don't know that that's the case. In the early days of it, some good projects were launching through there. So for me, it's a sell, just because there's other launchpads that I feel like have more clout, that likely the ones that even when the market does turn bullish again, those are the launchpad tokens I'd prefer to hold, not just for the potential appreciation, but to actually use their tokens like in order to be able to participate in the initial DEX offering of those great projects. All right, let's jump over to Meld.
Yeah, so I've taken a stab as to what this might be. So I've just put in Meld. There were a few options, but if you could tell me if this looks like the right chart.
Yep. It's at the right number.
Yep, 0.0180969.
Yeah, so essentially 1.8 cents.
Yeah, so 1.8 cents. So there must be something interesting from a fundamental perspective, because I mean, the trend is pretty much down, and it's this little price action here is normally associated with a continuation pattern, which means there's something called a flag where the market goes down, it goes sideways, and then it continues down. So with it so close to its all-time low on this chart, I can't really say very much more other than it's a sell. Where that would change would be if it would show a bit of strength, and no, I don't know if that's a spike. So I'm going to assume for the moment that that's bad data, because obviously in some of these thinly traded markets, you can get a incorrect price. So sometimes it's difficult to know whether it's right or not. I don't like to cut through price action, but for the sake of this quick discussion, I would say that it needs to break this trend line before I could even consider buying it. And even then, I'd be a little bit cautious, because the trend has been quite smooth to the downside, shall we say. And I'm detecting that it's not traded that much either. Potentially, maybe the volume's quite low just by the way the price action looks. But perhaps you can tell me. But for me, as you can see, the trend is down. So there might be something interesting fundamentally, which would attract people broadly into the project, and then we could see it stabilize and maybe go back up. But I can't see anything technically quite yet.
Yeah, that chart looks down, right? And like it looks like it's continuing down and going to continue down. So let me share a screen. I'm looking at a CoinGecko, which just shows a different view. I have it on linear. This is what logarithmic looks like, where it just is continuing down. some of this is the project's tokens are just vesting, right? As well as I'm not convinced that all the trading is being reflected here. Like CoinGecko is only showing BitTrue being the trading pair from BitTrue. However, it is on some decentralized exchanges on Cardano that aren't reflected here. So we're seeing a very low trading volume being tracked. There might be that little trading volume, but there might be some trading volume that's also not being tracked. Their fully diluted valuation is 72 million, which is quite high. I think this is somewhat near its pre-sale price, which my guess is numbers are going to go down even further, just because the trajectory that it's on. So I like this one a lot for the long term. I hold some. I'm not going to sell it, even though my recommendation would be like, looking at that chart, sell. The reason I'm not going to sell it because I love the team behind this and where it's going, and I will forget to buy back in. It'll be off my mind for like a month or two. I'll miss where the chart screams at me buy, and I'll just miss it. And I've been at this long enough to know that, there's so many projects out there that I like, that even one that I love as much as Meld, I'll forget to look at it, and then I'll miss this huge upside when it does turn around, and it'll make me sick, to my stomach. And that's happened before several times, which is why I make a different decision now than I would have made in my earlier days. My earlier days, I was tracking a lot less projects, and so the likelihood that I would miss it was less, as well as I did still miss some and had that sick to my stomach feeling as I watched the price skyrocket. Like this project, I've interviewed them a number of times on the channel. They're basically doing a really cool lending thing through the Cardano ecosystem, and it'll eventually be on multiple ecosystems, not just Cardano. But they have the right development team. I feel like the right leadership team. They have innovative loans, like loans that pay themselves back. So say you do a crypto loan, say you have $100,000 in Cardano. You can take out a loan against that, and say you take a $30,000 loan out against that 100,000 in Cardano. Well, what's cool is they're going to take that 100,000 Cardano and stake it. And to stake it, they're going to get rewards of like 5% staking rewards on that Cardano. And because you only borrow 30,000 against it, and yet they're staking 100,000 Cardano, the revenues from that staking exceeds what the interest is going to be. And so they'll use that staking to pay the principal back. They call it a genius loan, or pay back the interest on the loan, right? So that it'll be, well, some will actually pay principal back. Some, I think, will pay the interest. So they're doing these creative things that you can do in crypto, especially with projects like Cardano, where you can stake the underlying asset and earn a return on it. And I think it's innovative. DeFi's just been out of the narrative for a long time. So what the price action has going on is that they're vesting early sale tokens and pre-sale tokens, probably seed sale tokens. And yet the overall market is down. DeFi hasn't been in the narrative for a while. So the decreasing price makes perfect sense to me. And will probably continue until either Cardano comes strongly back into the narrative or DeFi does.
Okay.
And I don't want to miss that point. So as tempting as it is for me to sell and then just set that money to the side to buy it all back in, I've missed those buy points before. So great suggestion by one of our viewers. I love that one a lot. The next suggestion is one we just frequently did an interview with, and I was very impressed by the team, and that's World Mobile Token.
Yeah. So, yeah, World Mobile Token. That's so this is what we've got up here. Interesting. I'd like to hear what you think of them from a fundamental point of view, because I think they have a big challenge on their hands potentially, but if they can crack it, then it'd be amazing. In terms of the technicals, you can see this very sharp downward trend. There's been volatility, a double bottom that failed, and then trade into a new low that was rejected. And it's just been making higher lows for a while and staying in this triangular constriction. Now, triangular constrictions, you've got to be careful of, because when the market's staying very close to its low, it's kind of keep testing these lows. There is a risk that it will just take that out. Now, I'm hoping it'll be one of those assets that has looked like that and then just suddenly shot up. I mean, it's not guaranteed that it will go down. It's just that normally these triangles are bearish. And if we look at the fact that the macro position is maybe a couple of weeks from the end of this move, then if it can hold in with the next 2 weeks, then it's probably through the worst. But it has to hold in. So for me, it's a wait. But the signal that something's happening, like life is coming into this, would be a break of this downward trend line. That'd be this resistance line from the triangle. That'd be sort of 0.1. 0.2 it would need to get through 23 cents. So that would break the previous higher low, if you like. So this is the previous resistance. That would be really good. Now, all the other resistance points are relatively close. So if it can get through that, then the other ones should fall. And if it breaks any of those, as they break each of them, the position would become more and more bullish. And hopefully this would be enough of a base to spark a longer term rally. But, this is only if it does that. It has to actually do it for those conditions to be met. At the moment, it's still sitting very close to its all-time low. I think it is on this chart, the all-time low. And this line is sitting there as the cliff edge. So I'm a bit nervous of whether a little move could kind of spark some selling here. So I'm going to say it's a wait, and hope that it can weather the storm of the next few weeks.
Yeah, great suggestion by one of our viewers to look at the price analysis. So when I had one of their team members on, one of the things I look at is the strength of the team, and they have very strong team, and what they're doing is really interesting. So think about how Uber changed the world. So what was it that Uber did that changed things so big, right? They incentivized others to help them do things that they couldn't do themselves, and so that other people could get rewarded, right? So at New York City, at first, like taxi cab drivers and their union didn't take it seriously because they're like, no big deal. We have our, they kind of had a monopoly in New York City that you had to have these medallions. The medallions were like trading for like $1 million. Essentially, you had to have a taxi medallion in order to have a taxi cab in New York City. And what Uber's offer was, hey, so we have this system that if you want to put your car to work and yourself to work, we'll help you schedule rides that you can then drive them, and you'll get paid for it. So you can do this as a side gig. So one of the problems with cell phone and also internet services in the world is that there are so many places in the world that aren't covered. And the reason is the cost for the major providers to add cell phone and internet coverages to those areas isn't worth it. Well, World Mobile Token has come up with some technology that can decrease the cost to get coverage to those areas by 1/12 of what it would cost the major carriers to do it, while also providing incentives for those people, kind of like Uber did, that want to participate and get rewarded for helping provide that coverage and doing some things so they can participate in several different ways to be able to get value from providing coverage to those areas. And I would love to see this successful. You'd have far less dead zones for your cell phone as you're on a call. And, you might be driving on a call and get dropped, or you might be, maybe you're on a train somewhere and you lose coverage for a while. So it'll add incentives for third parties even to create coverage in those areas. Would love to see this one successful long term. I'm concerned too with the price action. I like to buy cheap. I like to buy really cheap. And from its previous high at $1, it's only down 80%. And it's funny that I'm like, it's only down 80%. I like to buy really cheap. And I don't know if it'll go down farther. It might not. It didn't launch all that long ago, just a little over or a little under a year ago. I just hope there's further downside so I can pick up a bunch cheap is what I'm hoping. So for me, it's just wait. I don't presently own any. I plan to own some. I'm just waiting for a great entry price and hoping it gets cheaper. If I end up missing it and this is the bottom and it bounces off that and goes up, well, then I miss it. I'm okay with that. I have lots of positions. But this one I really, really like. I would like to make a long-term hold on this. I'm just looking for a great entry price. All right, let's jump over to
MicroStrategy. Is it stock?
Yeah, let's look at that. And then I want to actually just add in one more. The other two we'll have to schedule for another week, but
okay,
another one I wanted to look at called Quant. So let's look at MicroStrategy, the stock.
Okay, I'll do that quickly then, just so we can get, because I think there's a few that we may have missed. We can obviously just do them next week. I mean, to be honest, there's not a lot to say here other than this is still in a consolidation. We had a potential double bottom here, which traded up but ran into resistance. It's now back in a range. So it's neither bullish nor bearish here. It's very neutral. I've got to wait to see whether it's going to attempt to take the lows out here, or whether it's going to turn around and take this trend out. I don't think it's going to be turning around until we see the bigger picture turn around. So it's doing well relative to the rest of the market because, of course, the S&P is already down here. The Nasdaq's much lower. So I like the fact that it's technically not near its lows for the year. That's one positive sign. And it could be that when everything else turns around, this could be a leader. So it's worth watching it. But for the moment, it's a neutral position, simply because the technicals aren't clear enough. There's no trend there at the moment. It's still in a consolidation. But as I say, there are some positives. I like the fact that this end of the trend move was very aggressive. What I like to see is panic at the end of the trend. And so that panic hasn't been taken out. Actually, exactly the same as Bitcoin. That panic level, whilst we're flirting with it and have done over the past few weeks, and it's been slightly frustrating, it's not taken it out. So that's another positive sign too. But I need to see a bit more evidence of an upward trend before turning bullish on it. And until then, it'll be a neutral.
Yeah, MicroStrategy is interesting. This so they hold a lot of Bitcoin on their books, and they've been continuing to borrow in order to buy Bitcoin. And so a lot of people holding MicroStrategy are a way that they can hold stock and capture the value of Bitcoin if they're not allowed to buy by whatever rules. Their board won't allow them to hold Bitcoin directly, whatever. It's kind of like a hedge with the Bitcoin price. So it's interesting to see what's happening with their stock price.
Yeah, you'd expect it just to be linked
related with Bitcoin, but there is some correlation.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there. You'd expect it to have some form of correlation to a certain extent, given how much they bought. But yeah, so I mean, it's an interesting idea to be a proxy as a stock for Bitcoin, but there are probably other ways of buying it. I would have thought. I don't know. Maybe the rules don't allow it. So yeah, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, let's take a look at Quant.
Yeah. So Quant US dollar. Let's see. Wow.
Yeah, currently.
Yeah. Okay. I see why you want to look at it and make sure we see it. Now, volume's gone up a lot. So something's happening here. This is in a different pattern to a lot of the other markets. The trend is up. I mean, okay, so let's draw in this trend line. So this is the main upward trend line. Look, fantastic. It trades really nicely. As long as it holds over this trend line, I think you can stay bullish, and that would be, the main indicator for this. there's a bit of resistance up ahead at $150. I mean, if this can take out $150 in this environment, that is impressive. It looks like it's going for it. So this break of this resistance point is going to definitely encourage some short-term buying. Now, whether there's enough between 133 and 150, it, remains to be seen, because I think 133 to 150 is the next key resistance point. But it's moving against the rest of the market, which is fascinating. So yeah, so you've got to go with it, technically, because as I say, the trend is up, the broader trend is up. It's broken resistance. It could potentially break some very key resistance at 150. If it does that, you're looking at the all-time high, or it's clear to head towards there. I mean, it doesn't guarantee it's going to go there, but that's what it needs to do in order to get there. So that's very interesting. Now, where I'd be cautious is if it breaks this trend line, or this is more a support line, because this is the main trend line down here, which is going to be rising with price. So the reason why that helps you is because if you buy it, your stop level from a technical point of view is always rising. So your risk is being reduced as the trend goes up. But I'd love to hear some more about this, because it's definitely a standout chart.
Yeah, the chart does look interesting versus the other ones that we've seen, and the pattern is very different. So it is down from its previous highs if we look on a linear scale of $400. But if we flip that around to logarithmic, we see exactly this pattern that Paul was just showing us. So let's look at some fundamentals. The market cap is quite high given where we are in the market. So 1.7 billion. Most of their tokens are in circulation. I really like that part of it. And the overall supply isn't that high, 14.6 million, which is why the price of this seems like it's pretty high itself. So a lot of times people think, oh, $134, that's so expensive. The reason we always look at what the circulating supply and total supply is if you have a small circulating supply, the true value is this market cap. That's what we look at, not the individual price here, because that doesn't tell you very much. That only tells you what they're asking for each token, but you have to have an understanding of how many tokens there are out there. Now, if the price is $134 and there's 10 billion tokens out there, then that price is very expensive. So something that might have 100 billion tokens out there, but is priced at $1, is actually much more expensive than what this is. So you don't just look at this price, you look at this price times the circulating supply, and that gives you the market cap, which gives you your true price, gives you an idea where it can go. Looking at their website, Quant Network. So this is a 3rd generation blockchain, and we covered another one today. So it's competing in that space, and it looks like there's probably some things going on behind the scenes that on the fundamental side that I'm aware of, and that's probably why the chart is so bullish. If you look at where they're going, financial institutions, enterprises, partners, so basically solving problems in these different areas. So probably there's some good stuff going on for them behind the scenes, and that's probably why it's so big. Now, we looked at that other one, and the transactions per second were only 2,000 transactions per second. Unfortunately, here we don't see what the transactions per second on this are, but probably they've got some big industry partners, and that's why their price is looking pretty bullish and why we're seeing that trajectory. Great suggestions by everyone. We couldn't get to all of them. Yeah, I love that we're getting more suggestions than we were able to get to, but we'll put some of them in the queue for next week.
Fantastic.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your time with us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for the picks. They're fantastic, really good, and look forward to getting into them next week.
Yeah, really good picks by everyone. If you have a suggestion for next week, put it in the comment section below. preferably tell us what you see or know that's going on with it. It really helps, because I don't know everything. I don't pretend to know everything. It helps us get an idea of what is going on. Do know that generally the crypto market is slow right now. I love these videos with Paul because that gives us an idea of what's going on, because that does turn around, and good decisions made during these pullbacks lead to life-changing ones when the market turns around. This wrap is for all of you, to reinforce the principles that I share that make all the difference in leading to higher returns.
Came into the space chasing all of the gains, chasing the pumps and all of the hype trains. But like in life, right before you could, was told to buy when it was pouring like a rainmaker should. Buy when it's down, don't chase the boats that I missed. Cause I always make the time in mind. I take the one out cause I'm patient like that, and I'll wait for the right time. I'll sell when it's high, I'll buy when it's low. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm just a rainmaker running the show. Calculated investments, I don't lead with my heart. Principles are simple, believe in a lot. Buy when it's boring, just gotta be smart. I sell when it's hype, like all the channels they pump it. That's when I was selling, got parabolic to dump it. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes the time fly by, years going so fast. The game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love, and I follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Time is never better, but time like the present. This next 5 years is a gift and it's feeling like heaven. I'm committed to learn, to study and to know that nothing comes easy, but with knowledge the game show. Sticking out this wrong, cause soon will come a bear market. Learning and growing, and when it's slow will be the target. Naysayers come out, Bitcoin is dead. The massive decreases can get to your head. Sticking around, the time is better. I'm strong like that, I'll let the others be fretters. 2 years time, the ball will bring back the gains. That makes it worth the effort, cause here comes the rain. So let's go rainmakers, let's make it all happen. Let go of the hate, let the haters be cracking. I'm here for 5 years, let's do this together. The time is right, the time could be better. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes the time fly by, years going so fast. The game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love, and I follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Haters be hating, but time to slow down. Addressing what they say when I'm wearing my crown. They're chasing green candles like someone who was new. I got a vision that was bigger, helping me to push through. I'm still human and sometimes it is rough, and that's what makes me special, simply I stay tough. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love, and I follow what I learn, not relying on luck.